Good day. This is Dr. Jana Price-Sharps with Mind Pilot. So today we are with Dr. Mathew Sharps again, and we are going to be talking about the cognitive principles that go into play when cognitively you're stuck and you want to make one decision and you're pretty sure that you should make a different decision. So we're going to talk about the importance of prior mental planning. We're going to talk about feature-intensive processing. We're going to talk about scripts. And some of this has been filtered through other podcasts, but I want it all in one place for you because this is such a common thing for everyone, where you end up in a situation where you're feeling kind of stuck. So, Dr. Sharps, thank you for coming on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so let's talk about, first of all, what is prior mental planning? What does that look like for us?
Well, it's having a framework for how you're going to respond in any given situation, so you aren't really surprised or shocked by it. Okay, the classic study of this had a situation where a guy is playing music to a young woman, and his speaker system is very bizarre. Okay, and when this was described to people, well, they didn't understand it at all until they were given a picture of this guy with all his equipment, the way it was set up. Then people understood it, and they remembered it better. Okay. Now, that only worked if the picture was given beforehand. So if you walk into a social situation that you are just not aware or not ready for, and then somebody says something insulting or something you don't understand, or people are behaving in an odd way, well, you're surprised. The feeling is very negative. You want to get out of there. If instead, let's say you've got a meeting with colleagues that is often unpleasant. Well, if you plan for that meeting, okay, yes, so-and-so is always unpleasant, but it's not all that important. So-and-so tends to talk on and on. If you don't interrupt him, things go fine, etc. If you have that plan before you walk in, not only will you be more comfortable, but you'll also be much more likely to be successful in whatever your goals are. So having a prior framework, prior plan, a good way of explaining this to law enforcement or fire personnel, right? You have to respond to a fire. You have to respond to a crime situation, a tactical situation. But you're always better off, right, if you have a chance to do a bit of reconnaissance to figure out, okay, this is what equipment we are going to need. Not, oh my God, we need it right now, but this is what we're going to need. These are the probabilities of terrain we'll be facing. These are the probabilities that numbers will be dealing with. Obviously, the tactical realities vary among the different first responder services, but the end message is the same. Let me I refer to it as a feature-intensive analysis. Let me understand the features of what it is that I'm going to encounter before I encounter it. So in my mind, I can simulate the probable courses of action and the ones that are most likely to lead to success, and the ones that I want to avoid, the ones that lead to failure.
So feature-intensive processing can be used before an event and after an event, correct?
Yes, and during the event, depending on how fast the event is going, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a continuum, really, of feature-intensive to Gestalt processing. The word Gestalt, from German, we translate it. It's a lousy translation, but we translate it as a whole or a configuration, the way the whole thing is. Okay. Now, let's consider that with reference to the fire service, for example. Okay. You have to get your vehicle loaded with the necessary equipment, all the necessary gear that you're likely to need in the field. But when you're in the field, the last thing you want to be thinking about is the individual features of the equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Your prior training allows you to use that equipment in a very high-speed way where you're not having to think about each point. The trick is recognizing when you do need feature-intensive processing, when things have changed so much, the situation has changed so much, that I now need a new prior plan to cope with what's happening next. That's an important point to recognize.
So one of the things that can prevent somebody from doing feature-intensive processing is if they are used to a particular script and they don't ever question the script, and then the script just continues. So for an example, maybe every time you come home from wherever, from work, being deployed, being in the field, whatever it is, you get into an argument with your wife or your husband, and you kind of know what that argument is going to sound like. In fact, I've actually had people write out an argument, and it's almost exactly the same argument over and over and over, and it never gets changed. So somebody could use feature-intensive processing to figure out a plan to change the script. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Scripts are essentially habitual. Okay, so I have a habit of behaving in this way, and my spouse probably has the same habit. And you'll notice, you may come home after a deployment, after a long period of work, and you may have the same argument again and again and again. And it's yelling at your spouse has never worked once. It's never worked once. So why would you do it? Okay, so what you would probably want to do is say, okay, well, this is why this always happens. Why does it always happen? What can I change about my behavior? And you can't control anybody else's behavior, but you might be able to control your own behavior in such a way that the negative consequences don't happen. Okay? So this is where the feature-intensive analysis as a prior framework comes in. I know you've talked a lot about imaging situations, thinking about situations in imagery, playing to yourself in your mind how this is going to pan out. What you're really doing there is feature-intensive analysis in a manner that many people almost never do, which is to question the scripts, question our habits of mind. Those habits run really deep. An exercise I always use in my classes, right? If somebody has breakfast, the same thing for breakfast every day, this doesn't work. But most people don't. If you say, what'd you have for breakfast 5 weeks ago on Tuesday? Nobody can tell you. Then you ask them, well, what'd you do first? Get out of bed or have breakfast? Everybody knows they got out of bed. That's a script. There are some cultures, few cultures, it goes the other way, but in general, you get out of bed before you have breakfast. Okay, fair enough. But the funny thing about that, I think it's crucial, is people that can answer questions about that they've never thought about before. We'll ask, okay, here's a guy who has his breakfast before he gets up every day. Is he rich or poor? Practically everybody goes, well, he's rich. His butler brings it to him. Okay, fair enough. Now here's a guy who had breakfast in bed today, and today only. His wife brought it to him. But he's poor. Is he sick or well? Everybody just choruses sick. Now, nobody's ever thought about those dim-witted questions before. But the script in your mind of, oh, you get up before you have breakfast is so powerful that you're able to extrapolate, to go beyond that, to answer these questions. So really, the critical point there, I think, is number one, scripts, habits of mind are extraordinarily strong. But secondarily, they run on automatic in the background. Lots of them we simply don't think about how we're going to do whatever it is. That goes to a related concept, the mental set. Okay, this is a habit of mind. If anybody says, but we always do it this way, well, sometimes that's because this is the only way to do it. It works. Other times, it's a habit of mind that may be too inflexible to deal with changing circumstances.
Absolutely. And within those parameters, I want to talk a little bit about emotional decision making. And there are times that is fine. There are times that it is a disaster. And so what do you do when you find yourself making decisions that are leading to additional chaos and problems in your life? And one way to prevent this, I call it a cognitive override. That's just my terminology for it. But what I mean by that is you're overriding the emotional system that wants you to do what feels good in the moment. And you're overriding it with your higher level thinking by using the feature-intensive processing, the prior planning, and breaking out of those scripts that may be toxic. So sometimes, I'll give you an example, people get stuck in relationships that are really not going well. And maybe it's because you're with a person maybe that's not real healthy for you. Or maybe the two of you have gotten into habits that are toxic, but if you changed the habits, the two of you would do just fine. But to have a solid relationship, you have to be able to kind of step back and do some cognitive overrides with your system. So what would that look like? Well, a again, you're coming home, you're tired, you're irritable, you've had maybe a bad shift, whatever, and you're coming home angry, irritable, that kind of thing. And you've gotten into the script that we always have a fight when I get home. Well, maybe before you come home, maybe before you even go out on deployment or out on assignment or even to work, you think about, that's a prior mental planning, think about, okay, how can I change this? A lot of people just kind of go through life going, well, it is what it is. You know, we always get in a fight. Well, but you don't have to. You can, but you don't have to. So what can you do differently? And a lot of times it is looking at a situation that keeps occurring and say, okay, is there something that I can do differently that will change the outcome of this? Maybe I need to set boundaries. Maybe I need to go work out before I come home. Maybe I need to come home and go take a shower and cool down a little bit before I engage. Maybe I need to say something different to my spouse rather than, why the heck does the refrigerator look like a mess? You know, thinking about what can I do to shift this that will make this situation better. And part of that is you have to take the emotion out of it and ask yourself, logically, what can I do? And sometimes that's hard to do with our own lives. But one of the things you can do, and you're probably going to hear me say this in other podcasts as well, what would I tell my son to do, or my daughter to do, or my best friend to do, or, you know, somebody that I'm close to? What would I tell them to do in this situation? Most of the time we know what we need to do, we just don't do it. We do what feels good at the moment, and sometimes what feels good may be to yell. Doesn't mean it's a good idea. Sometimes it may feel good to get drunk, but maybe it's not a good idea. That's your choice. You have to think about that. But ask yourself, what would I tell my best friend or somebody that I really love to do in this situation? Then use a cognitive override. Do that. Doesn't matter whether it feels good or not. Do that because you know it's the right decision. And I can tell you over and over and over, if you will do that on a regular basis, your life will get better. Because you know what? You have the right to be happy. You have the right to wake up in the morning and feel good about life. You have the right to live a healthy life. And a lot of times that just means making small changes. So please take care of yourself. This is Dr. Jana Price-Sharps with Mind Pilot. Please feel free to subscribe. Take care.